You're watching or listening to The Looking Forward Show on PhillyCam, WPPM LP, Philadelphia, 106.5 FM, or PhillyCam TV. You can also see us live streaming on Xfinity 66 and 966, on Bios TV 29 and 30, on Roku, Apple TV, and Facebook, as well as our YouTube channel. And now, here's your host, Jeffrey Abramowitz.
A wonderful show. Welcome to PhillyCam. Looking forward. You're listening to PhillyCam, WPPM LP Philadelphia, 106.5 FM. I am your host, Jeff Abramowitz, and you can watch us and listen to us on PhillyCam TV. We're live streaming right now on Xfinity 66, 96, on Bios TV 29 and 30, on Roku, Apple TV, Facebook, and our YouTube channel, The Looking Forward Show. And I'm so glad to be here. And we have a great show for you today. I have three great people that are going to be with us today, and I'm super excited. I'm also excited to be talking about a topic that we don't talk enough about, and we're talking and diving into homelessness and home insecurity in our city and in our country, and what we should be knowing about it. But first, I want to give you a catch-up. So our catch-up for this week is all about some things that have happened recently. First, I want to bring you up to speed on a wonderful event I went to over the weekend. It was sponsored by Philly Truce, and it was Philly Truce Day. Now, if you're not familiar with Philly Truce, you got to Google them, check them out. Philly Truce has this wonderful app that engages people in Philadelphia, and really is working to stem the tide of violence in our city. And they had this project called Philly Truce Day, where they brought all these groups and organizations together, but it was mostly young people. And I was amazed at just a few hundred young people out playing flag football. They're playing on a basketball court that the 76ers actually donated and actually rebuilt for them at Lighthouse Field. And it was right in the heart of North Philadelphia. Just an incredible event all day long, activity going on. There was people dancing. There's a lot of rap music playing, some vendors out there, a lot of resources. So a big shout out to Philly Truce, Mazzy Kasher, and Stephen Pickens, who just did an amazing job with the event. Been traveling a bunch lately. Was at the CEA conference, Correctional Educators Conference, out in Harrisburg last week, and also spoke at the Pennsylvania Association of Adult Continuing Education, and had a great conference out there. And I'm glad to be traveling again tomorrow, actually back on the road again out to New Mexico, speaking to the Department of Education out there. It's really crazy as I go across the country everywhere. You know, we're all still going through COVID, and we're trying to all figure it out. And it's just good to know that we're no different here in Philly than we are across the country. Everybody's still struggling, trying to figure out mask up, mask down, handshake, elbow bump, what is going on. And we're all trying to figure it all out, and it's all good. But seeing people at conferences, there's something about that face-to-face where you connect with somebody and you have this one-on-one conversation about the challenges we're facing in the justice space and in our communities. And it's incredible when you do that, because it's just a different level to me. And a lot of people are content working from home, and that blended or virtual reality, virtual work. I get it. I know it's a safe way right now. But again, I'm hoping we'll all be able to jump back in the pool and open our doors back up to some live programming. So I'm really excited to talk about home, the topic today, which is everybody needs a home, and everybody does need a home. And I know we are facing a crisis not only in Pennsylvania but in our country. We have 13,000 plus people in Pennsylvania that are homeless, and it's interesting. I'm going to give you some numbers, but the irony is I was just talking to one of our guests, Dean Beer, who's a good friend, and Dean said, "You're not going to give him all those numbers, are you?" I'm like, "Yeah." Kind of lay the land a little bit, because I think people need to really understand the scope of the problem here in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania, and know that we're not alone. I was out in Austin, Texas, and in Austin, Texas, where homeless population somehow propagated under the highways, are now inner city, and now they're right on the streets and in the alleys. And I was out in Seattle not long ago, a few weeks ago, and in Seattle, right on the streets, men and women just struggling with housing insecurity, trying to find a place to live. But in Pennsylvania in particular, it hits home when you know that over 900 veterans are homeless, and that about 1,700 people in Pennsylvania just have chronic homelessness. But the number of homeless students just astounded me. Is upwards of 31,000 students just don't have a place that they call home, and that's kind of staggering. But there's so many pieces that come into play, and there's so many parts of it, including income. And I know we're going to be jumping on this with our guest, one of our guests, and we're going to be talking to Lou about it. Lou Narvaez from the Pennsylvania Probation and Parole is in the house, and Lou's been he's been a stalwart of our show, and we appreciate him coming in. So we're going to take a really quick break, but we're going to come back. We're going to bring Lou Narvaez, District Director of Pennsylvania Probation and Parole, on, and Lou is going to be telling us, talking to us about what's going on and updating us. And again, you're listening to the Looking Forward show, and again, we're on PhillyCam Radio, WPPM LP 106.5 FM, and we're live streaming at PhillyCam. So we'll be right back. We are back. You're listening to PhillyCam Radio, WPPM LP Philadelphia 106.5 FM, and PhillyCam TV. And we have our good friend Lou Narvaez with us today. How are you, Lou?
Hey, all is well. Thank God for everything. I'm doing great. How about yourself, Jeff?
Good, good. Thank you so much again for joining us. I was just mentioning that in the studio today that we are at our we're at our 85th show. We've done 85 shows since we've been on, which is kind of remarkable. It seems like yesterday that you were in the studio. We're just kicking off and getting started and figuring out how the microphones work. We're still doing that today, so that's all good.
Right.
So how are you? To bring us up to speed, what's going on at the DOC?
Well, a lot of good things going on as usual. And parole field services in particular, we continue to look at the specialized caseloads and trying to tailor caseloads to the needs of the client. What their needs are, and trying to provide them with those needs to avoid recidivism or minimize recidivism. We do have, as I discussed previously, specialized caseloads, mental health, sex offenders, domestic violence. We have all types of house arrest, GPS, those type of specialized needs that have to be met that we continue to focus on. We continue to reduce the caseload sizes for the agents so they can have more client-specific time in these particular caseloads. We do that in our general population as well as in the specialized. We minimize the number of clients they actually have in attempts to have them devote more time to the client base. On the DOC side of the house, and I believe you're involved in this, Jeff, there a couple of years ago, under Secretary Wetzel, certain delegates from the DOC went to Sweden to look at their very innovative system of how they treat people that are incarcerated. And they have a model which is being referred as Little Sweden as SCI Chester. And I believe if you jump in, you can tell me your experience you had when I believe you're involved in that at Chester.
I can. I was down there. I was down there not long ago. I had some guests coming in from the Department of Ed in Iowa, and they joined me down with a site tour down at SCI Chester. And a Little Scandinavia, I think they call it. Yes. And it's just remarkable. So first thing that I noticed when I walked into the unit was it's all different colors. Like it's really almost like it was multicolored. It was really uplifting. But the thing that was kind of cool with it, there were fish tanks. There was a lot of mobility, like you had a lot of free range. There was a mindfulness room. They cook their own meals there. So they have this big kitchen where they prepare their own meals right there. And I was just talking to somebody recently that's down there that was part of they did this by lottery system. Apparently you applied and then they just picked people out that were by lottery to get in there. And they said that, the men that are there at SCI Chester are just cherishing it. They have these mindfulness rooms, just incredible.
Yeah, it is. It shows the innovation in thinking on part of Secretary Little as picking up where Secretary West left off in moving forward and how institutions will probably look in the future. Because just as all things, police are looking at how they're doing policing, parole is looking at how we've been doing parole. Everybody is looking at new ways of doing things that may not have been as successful as they want them to be, or to modify in those areas where they are successful to enhance them to make them even better.
Yeah, Lou, isn't it a lot of it just do with just basic dignity?
Yeah,
When you're away,
yes.
it's like, just being treated right. We know we know we've done something wrong, and that's why we're there.
Right.
But also just treating people with dignity and respect, and trying to give them that push in that right direction to get there, right?
And that's the premise in case supervision and parole, and that's the premise in the DOC that we all work from. We're all looking at treating people with dignity. As you say, you're there for a reason, but one of the reasons, or the main reason, is not to be belittled, berated, or dehumanized. You're there so that you can come out and be a successful citizen. If that's what you choose to do, then you can do that, and we're here to help you do that. And that's why this topic you have today is of such great importance, because some of the challenges we face in parole is with housing, because you cannot come on parole if you don't have an approved home plan. And there are certain populations that have more problems in getting approval, such as sex offenders or those individuals who are returning to a housing authority facility. Now, basically, the housing authority restriction, to my knowledge, was if you were a manufacturer of meth or if you were an arsonist. But it seems that individual sites may choose to use their own type of guidelines in who or who cannot return to a housing authority facility. So that becomes some of the challenges. But when you look at the numbers, you have every year in the country 700,000 individuals that are returning from a state prison in America, and you have 9 million that are returning from a county jail. But 10% of those people that are coming out of prison were homeless prior to going into the institution and will become homeless after leaving the institution. So that becomes part of the challenge that we face, but it's embedded in the concept, which I found very interesting when I read the Title 42 of the U.S. Code that deals with a definition of homelessness for public health and welfare. And it reads, the way it reads, an individual or family who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. Well, I always thought of homelessness as someone who didn't have a home, regardless of whether it's night or day, because as you know, and anyone with a home, if in fact you feel tired or sick, whether it's 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 10 a.m., you stay home. And the foregoing conclusion is you're going to be there at night. So I always just thought of it, you didn't have a home. But according to the government, the definition is based on an adequate nighttime residence. And this plays a crucial role in how services are received. Then they talk about any individual or family with a primary nighttime residence, again, nighttime, that is public or private place not designated for or ordinary use as a regular sleeping accommodation for human beings. Could be a car, parking lot, etc. So nighttime seems to be how the government is defining homelessness. So I guess if you have a place to stay in the day, that doesn't fit into the equation. And I was glad that you brought up some things also in reference to like the unstableness or the insecure homeliness, like where people who may have a home, but they're on the verge of losing their home. They have to maybe pay more money. All their money have to go toward the housing opposed to other things that normal families have. And part of the concept that we deal with now is the homeless person has this stigma that's associated with some form of criminalization, like you must be involved in crime somehow. And that goes back to the old historic, when I was looking in this, it goes even back to Ben Franklin, when Ben Franklin took exception to Queen Elizabeth's edict on the homeless, where they were to help them and to aid them. And he said that the country was coming, we had a greater population of idle people who were more or less idle and not busy and not doing productive things. That's a snapshot of what he said. He moved at that point that we began to work with people to give them trades and learn where they can become useful members of society, which melds into what we're trying to do today. Now,
yeah, so go ahead.
Interestingly enough, from what I learned, that Philadelphia, for a large urban area, didn't fare that bad. Now, that's not me saying that, oh, because the numbers are low, it's not bad. No, not at all. That's me saying the numbers I came up with. Philadelphia had about 5,700 people that were considered to be homeless, and 950 of them were unsheltered. So, if in fact those numbers are still correct, they're among some of the lowest and the largest urban city areas in the country. But that has to do with a grassroots movement that took place in 1988, and it was an African American gentleman named Chris Stowall. And what that gentleman did, who actually ended up being the lead at the National Union of the Homeless, he took a group of people and they took over some houses in North Philadelphia. Now, you know that didn't go over too well. That didn't go over too well. And the city sat down and dealt with them and came up with a plan where they actually gave them houses to live to. That was something that was never done before. So it was a remarkable feat that was done. But we still here in the same situation when you fast forward today with the homeless. And the homelessness impact, because on the whole, if a person is homeless and we can't get him situated, then he presents a danger to himself and others. But we utilize the resource, our toolkit, to try to find somewhere to stay. And even to the point that our agents have a time frame that they have to satisfy and respond into a home plan. But part of that then becomes the battle, because some of the guys have burned their bridges and the family doesn't want them back, and the family doesn't want us to tell them that they declined to accept them.
Yeah. I got to tell you though, Lou, honestly, in all the work that I do in reentry, I would say, other than a job, which I put in a different category, I think homelessness and finding home security is the number one challenge for men and women coming from our prisons. And we're working on a project with the city of Philadelphia. It's called Upward Mobility. And it's actually doing survey work, trying to figure out and ask the question to people that have been incarcerated, like, what are the challenges coming home and finding a house? And, how do you find an apartment, and what are the barriers? And we're hearing all the things you need, we know are out there. Like I can't get, landlords not gonna rent to me because of my background. I can't afford rent the deposit for a place. All these things that, just pile on top of each other. I think we need to do a better job, I think, at trying to find alternative housing or transitional housing for as men and women come home, so that they can gradually get in and get on their feet, get working, get stable, and then move into, a more stable environment. And I don't necessarily do enough. We haven't found the secret sauce for sure.
Well, I agree with you. And part of it, I think, is because we really can't separate homelessness from the other factors that impact on their ability to have a home. Part of that is employment. I guess is which came first, the chicken or the eggs. For them to have a home, they have to have income. For them to have income, they have to be clean if there's somebody that had some type of alcohol or drug abuse part. So all roads lead to Rome. And it's interesting that you talked about how they tell you, they being the parolees, the struggles they have, because it's true. Because to the point that I was looking at what the guidance was given by the Office of General Counsel for the Fair Housing Act in April of 2016. And they talked about the background check and how it impacts on a person's ability to get a home. And they gave guidelines to say that you shouldn't discriminate against a person who has a criminal record. Once again, guidelines.
Yeah, they are just guidelines, because we all know anyone that's doing this work, that's out on the street or just come home, know that it doesn't really work that way.
Right, but those are the guidelines. That was the recognition that the problem exists, but it didn't go a step further, which is what it needed to go. Yeah. But this is part of the equation when you talk about homelessness. You have to have a job, you have to be clean, you have to want to be able to. You have to be highly motivated too. You got to be motivated, and it's hard when you're constantly facing obstacles put in front of your way. You're trying to go out here and it's constantly a no, but you got to just hang in there. You got to keep going forth. You got to not give up. and you got to try to make what you want real. And that's the bottom line. You got to see what
Absolutely.
happens.
So I gotta tell you, as with all the shows that you come on and you're one of our guests, I laugh because I always know you're going to bring a historical fact with you. So you got me with that because I wasn't prepared for Ben Franklin being involved in this conversation today, but you got him in there. You weaved him in there a bit.
Well, just for one other thing, as you know, some of the challenges for the chronically homeless when you deal with the mental illness, when Byberry closed, they put a lot of people out who weren't prepared and end up living on the street. But prior to that, there was a place in West Philadelphia, the Bordley House. And the Bordley House housed people they were people who were also in what they call mentally insane at that time, but also who were homeless and indigenous people in the communities until they start farming people out to Byberry when they closed. And then Byberry.
So what did we do? We closed Byberry, which was a mental and behavioral hospital in Philadelphia, up on the boulevard. We closed Byberry years ago, and what we did was we just incarcerated them, and then we just put them out on the street. And that's where a lot of our homeless population,
and put them into another institution, because they weren't prepared. They weren't prepared to. There wasn't proper planning to let them out, and they let them out because of the ACLU had found how they were being treated. Which I get it. If they're being treated wrong, then let's correct that. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater all at once, and then we find we have another problem we created.
For sure. Yep. So Lou, thank you so much for everything. We hope that, if there's a message out of all this, that, it's one of my missions as I talk to Secretary Little, who's always open for an ear, is that, housing's got to be a number one priority. And I know jobs are important. We got a lot of people doing workforce development out there, but we need to help people find safe places to live and to reunite with their families. They can have their kids with them and live in decent livings, that humanity factor again. So, Lou, thank you so much for being on. We appreciate you, and we look forward to you coming on in the next show.
I appreciate you as always, and thank you for the opportunity to share what we're doing in parole, because we too believe that family unification is a critical part of successful reintegration. So thank you, and stay well and stay safe.
Thanks, Lou. Right. So you're listening to Philly Cam Radio, WPPM LP 106.5. We're going to be right back with Dean Beer. Is going to be right with us. Listening to Philly Cam Radio, WPPM LP 106.5, and Philly Cam TV. We're live streaming on Xfinity 6696, Xfinity, Vios TV 2930, Roku, Apple TV, Facebook, YouTube channel at The Looking Forward Show. And I'm here with a good friend, Dean Beer. How are you, Dean?
Great. Thanks for having me, Jess. I really appreciate coming here.
Dean is with the Homeless Advocacy Project, and we have so much to talk about. So we got the ball rolling a little bit with Lou, but I want to spend a minute or two, and I want to get you talking in the microphone so everybody can hear you. There you go. You can pull it closer if you want. There you go. So, Dean, first of all, why don't you introduce yourselves and tell the audience a little bit about you, because I know a lot.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. And my name is Dean Beer. I've been the executive director of the Homeless Advocacy Project for a little over a year now. I've worked prior to that. I've worked as a public defender for many years, representing people in Philadelphia and North Carolina, and that's where I spent most of my time as a public interest lawyer. And now I'm on the civil side at the Homeless Advocacy Project, and it's been a great transition.
Love it. So we've known each other since I've been home, I guess around 6 years.
Yep.
And I first met you at some events. And everyone said, you got to go. You got to meet this guy. You got to meet him. He's doing some great work. And I approached her and I said, you know what? I want to do some work in your office. And you were at in one of the counties
That's right.
doing public defender work.
That's right.
And I think I can help some people. And you said, bring it on, bring it on. You had me up there. And it was a remarkable experience. But you definitely you opened the door for me.
Right.
And thank you so much for that. You've transitioned. So first of all, I want to know a little about your career as a lawyer. You still are a lawyer, so am I. But the work that you were doing, were you always doing public defender work in criminal practice, or how did it start?
No. Actually, I had no desire. I had no idea that I was going to do public interest law. When I left college, I went to law school, and I was a tax lawyer in Center City for 3 years.
Oh, how boring is that?
Well, I have to say it was quite interesting. But I also looked at my life and said, do I want to spend the 60 or 70 hours a week that I'm working doing this? And I decided no. It was through volunteering with homeless volunteer groups. The group up on North Broad Street that was called Philadelphia Committee for the Homeless. And we would go out on the streets at night and bring food and conversation to people who were living on the streets at the time. And that really is what got me to say goodbye to a life of being a tax lawyer. And it's probably the best decision I ever made.
Coming on the other side. Yeah. So I'm always amazed, like when lawyers have this transition in life.
Yep.
So some like me, they take a long way, they go to prison. Others like you transition from the career as a lawyer into the public sector. And I'm kind of curious, like, do you think you wear a different pair of glasses today than you wore as a lawyer?
When I was a tax lawyer?
Yeah, even now, do you see the world differently because of your experiences working with the homeless population, people that have been justice impacted?
Yes. So when I first left tax law, and maybe you don't know if you know this, I worked for I was a farm worker labor lawyer in California with Cesar Chavez in the United Farm Workers Union.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
And I will say that changed the way I looked at the world more than anything else. After walking through this country and seeing people who work 70, 80, 90 hours a week. And one of the things, we talk about how to cure poverty and people experiencing homelessness is to have a job and to work and to have money for a home. But I met people who work 60, 70 hours a week who could barely afford a place to live. And it changed the way I looked at the world. And I don't think I've ever kind of thought about things the same since then.
So some of the things we talked about, I used some data, and you and I talked before the show a little bit about data, and everybody throws the numbers out.
Yep.
Good.
And I think that's important. I didn't mean to. What I think I actually said was that yes, there's a lot of numbers, and I've got stacks of them. But the reality of it is, the people who have the power to cure this, the politicians and the people who are in places of power, they know those statistics. They don't need to be told the numbers. I mean, it's a question not of knowing the problem. It's now finding the answers and then solving the problem.
So I agree, but yet even preparing for this show, I learned things that I did not know regarding the number of people that are homeless, but things that really shocked me. I want to give you some of them. I want to get your impact. So first of all, we know that Philadelphia is the 23rd poverty rate in Philadelphia. It's one of the largest in the nation as far as poverty. But one of the numbers that got me was in Philadelphia, a person would have to work 86 hours a week at minimum hourly wage of $7.25 to afford a modest one-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
86 hours a week. And if they get SSI, Social Security, Supplemental Security Income, which pays only $805 a month, and the market rent in Philadelphia is $811. So they're using their entire check just to pay for that apartment, which is often usually a one-bedroom kind of place. That coupled with the reality that we have such an opioid crisis in Philadelphia, as we do across the country, people dying left and right from opioids, I can't help but thinking about the connection between drug use and crime and poverty and homelessness and how they all kind of fit together. And I guess I'd like you to walk us through a little bit your take on what's really happening when we talk about our homeless population. What's the makeup of them, and what should we be doing? Where should we be focusing?
Well, I will say, first off, it's $841 a month now. It has gone up. I think it's $841. And one of the first things I have on my kind of list of things is that living wage, that people have to be able to earn a living wage to pay for housing. And the other thing that I think talk about, and I never thought about, someone said this, we always talk about affordable housing, right? And I think the numbers are 30% of your income is affordable housing. But that's not housing for poor people. Going back to that 841, where can you find a place to live for 30% of 841 a month?
Wow.
Right. So what we really need to think about is housing for people who are poor, and make sure that we have clean, affordable housing. And the one thing I also wanted to pick up that you said with you're on with the last guest, dignity, and that's really where we have to remember that people who are experiencing homelessness, making sure that they're treated with dignity and respect, and when they go into shelter, that they're treated just like you or I would, or when they receive services, they are treated just like you and I would. And I think that's important. And the last thing I would point out, and this is where I want to at least decouple your answer from the drug. The one thing I haven't heard in this conversation, which is is the number of families that are homeless. And that is a huge number of children and families, intact families that are living in shelter housing. And again, that has nothing to do with drugs or mental. These are families trying to keep their family together. They're staying in shelter housing. And I think we always have to remember that those are the ones we see on the street. It's the invisible home people who experience homelessness that we don't see. Just like returning citizens, many of these guys and gals are couch surfing, staying with family members. And so I think we have to remember that a lot of the times it's the people we don't see that are highly impacted by this problem.
No question. I run time and time again. I'm running into families that are living out of their cars with 2 or 3 kids, and stopping by one of our offices for diapers because they can't afford them,
right.
Baby formula, and that kind of thing. When we talk about homeless insecurity, I think there's often the first connection that people make, and I made it before I really saw it, was that crime, that they must be involved in the justice system.
Right.
And that's not really fair, and that's not really true, is it?
It's not fair. It's probably not true. But again, we have criminalized homelessness. And so, we've criminalized mental illness, right? We know that, as we talked about, when the institutions closed, we locked up people who were mentally ill, and we put them in jails that were not equipped and not trained to handle them. You talk to, I'm sure you've talked to many wardens who say, that people are brought in here for very minor incidents, and we don't have the facilities to actually give them the care they need. So I think that, in many ways, one of the things that we look at is how do we make sure that they're not criminalizing homelessness.
Which is really hard when you think about it, because there's so many pieces of it. I've been doing this project with the city, this upper mobility project, and we've been able to talk to women, we've been able to talk to returning citizens, where we're talking to some people in a halfway house setting to see how good a job we did preparing them behind the walls to come home. And what we're hearing over and over again are that our systems have been failing for a long time. I mean, even people, one of the big things we heard was the long list. Like, I've been on a list for 4 years waiting for a house and nothing. And I call and can't get on the list, and people are waiting for it. The fact that landlords often take advantage of those men and women that are trying to get into the system and trying to get properties and trying to get in, and now gentrification's thrown a whole nother loop to it. Look, trust me, I live in Fishtown. I know I see it in front of me.
Right.
These properties going up left and right, pushing people out further and further, and taking up buildings that could be really used for multifamily dwellings that are no longer available. Can you walk us through what are the challenges that you see? Men and women that are facing homelessness, what are the common things, the common threads that people are facing?
Well, so one of the things, two of the things that HAP does, and again, I talk about this, and I talk to students. I say it's not sexy, but one of the things that we do for clients is obtain identification documents, and you don't think about that, but we do, I think, something like 600, 700 we've done so far this year, birth certificates.
Wow.
Because if you don't have a birth certificate, you can't get an ID, and you can't even get on these lists, or you can't get into any possible housing programs if you don't have the ID that you need. And so for many individuals, they may have it, but if you're living on the street and the rain comes, it gets ruined, you have to start over. One of the things that HAP was a part of, along with a lot of other coalition of people, was to, if you're experiencing homelessness in Pennsylvania, your birth certificate is free. And that's
Right.
and that's important.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. So again, just getting people basic documentation is so important, but nobody thinks about it because it's not, as I say, sexy.
Yeah, so let's talk not sexy about this. There's another piece to that is when you apply for your birth certificate, you have to get it sent somewhere. And if you're homeless, where do you have it sent to?
So for the people that we represent, we have it sent to our office. And so we as part of the process, you have to certify that they are experiencing homelessness, and we have to, again, we make it, I think we always make it harder. You know, people around me probably get tired of me, but for all of you who are Dorothy Day fans, I remember with Dorothy Day, I always heard that she said that we have to make it easier for people to do good. And so we put up a lot of barriers for people. You have to, you know, if we are requesting a birth certificate, we have to send in a copy of our license certifying that we're representing someone and that they are experiencing homelessness. So that puts up barriers for other people to do this work. But it's sent to us, and then we contact them either at the shelters they're living in or at the housing. You know, people have cell phones now, and so we contact them. They come in, and then we provide their birth certificate. We don't have the ability to keep a copy of an original birth certificate. So, you know, again, how can you do that? And something we've talked about trying to figure out how to do.
Yeah, that's really hard. So tell us a little bit about HAP. What does the Homeless Advocacy Project do? How do they work?
So the Homeless Advocacy Project was started in 1990 by the Bar Association to combat, to have lawyers involved in combating the problems of homelessness in Philadelphia. And so now we've evolved into we have 17 people in the office. I think we're up to 18 now. And we work on a model of staff, lawyers, paralegals, and a large volunteer contingent from the law firms in Philadelphia. So for many years, and what I think is great about what we do is we don't ask our clients to come to us. We go to them. So traditionally we went into soup kitchens, we went into day centers, shelters, and we meet our clients where they are. Right now we're doing that. So we have a lawyer that we call an embedded lawyer up at Broad Street Ministries. He's there every week for 4 hours, and people get to know him. And he's there for people. Whatever their concerns are, they'll come to them, talk about it, and then depending on what the need is, we either do it in-house or refer it out to another organization.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy good. I mean, so many people don't realize that there are free legal services out there that they can get for and little things. They may need a social security card. Like you can direct them where the social security card is, or to get a driver's license or state identification and be able to direct them there. And I know you and I have been looking to partner on a number of initiatives where, the men and women that are coming home from incarceration and those that we work with just that are struggling, they'll get connected to legal services. Yeah. So do people have to pay for this?
No, it's all free of charge. We're very lucky. As I said, birth certificates in Pennsylvania are free, but not out-of-state birth certificates. And many of our clients come to us born in Jersey or in other parts of the country, and there is a fee for that. And we cover that, or what we've been very lucky is the law firms in Philadelphia that do the volunteer work, law firms and corporations in Philadelphia who volunteer for us, pay for those fees pro bono.
Wow, that's great. Great stuff. Did you so tell us though, how many offices do you have, how many agencies do you work at if you're in Philadelphia? I take it's not just at one office.
Right now we mostly work at our main office. We have, as I said, an embedded attorney at Broad Street Ministries, and then we have an attorney every week at the Hub of Hope, which is part of Project Home.
Yeah.
Basically, there we're working on shelter access issues. Really have a place for people to come who have concerns about access to shelter in Philadelphia, and that's an issue that we deal with.
Yeah, time and time again, when I work with people and I engage now everywhere I go, like just tell me, how can I help you when they're on the street? And what I often hear is that they just don't feel safe in shelters. And I will tell you, I'm good friends with Jeremy Montgomery from Sunday
Sure.
Breakfast and Jeremy Aaron, and they're starting to change that narrative. And they really treat the men there with dignity. And they serve 3 meals a day. I think that respect, we keep talking about dignity in this area, but it's so important just to realize that, people that are facing home insecurity are often, they are people. They're people first.
Yep. In fact, I just was over there about a week or two ago, had lunch with him and his staff and talked about how we could, for us, it's capacity and funding. But one of the ways is thinking about how we could put an attorney at Sunday Breakfast on a regular basis to help their clients.
Yeah, good deal.
And had great. I don't know if you have another question, but the one thing I did want to touch on that we haven't really talked about is youth homelessness, and that's again another. So I talk about families with children, but also about young people. And there was a great article in today's Billy Penn. I guess that's an online paper, but the article was about about young people and whether we're counting correctly. And one of the things that I think your prior guest talked about was the numbers. And I think that's a hard. People have numbers, but then there's a lot of people who say, well, we're not capturing everyone that we should. And with youth, it's even harder because they don't access services. They're not in the same places as adults. They're doing more couch surfing. They're a little less likely sometimes to engage. And so I think that's another area where we really have to remember that housing insecurity for our young people is a big issue.
It touches everybody, families, the young, the old, all of them. So we're going to take a quick break, but we're going to we want you to sit right there because you're going to be co-hosting, and we want to bring on Steve Grosswald's going to be up with us next, and we're going to be right back at the Looking Forward Show. Back at the Looking Forward Show on Philly Cam Radio WPPM LP. So, Dean, I bet you didn't think when your day started that you'd get to co-host with me today. So, Dean's going to ride with me a little bit. We're gonna talk through this because Steve Grosswald's in the wings, and I want to bring him on. Steve, I'm not sure if you can hit your camera to come on. We're going to add you to the stream here, but if you can, that would be great. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. We'll just keep you on screen like that. Then, if you can't get your camera on, that's no problem. But Steve,
well, the only choice I have is stop cam.
No, we're cool. Keep it where it's going. We want to. There you go. So we wanted to let everybody know July 4th of 2020, Steve launched Mission Philadelphia. It's a 501c3. It's the vision of ending hunger and homelessness and reducing poverty by below 20% in Philadelphia by July 4th, 2026. Steve, your time is running out. Steve's passion is coordination and collaboration to achieve greater organizational effectiveness, accountability, and transparency for continuous outcome optimization for the nonprofit ecosystem in Philadelphia. That is a mouthful. But Steve, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Now, I don't know if you saved the best for last or you ranked me last because you view me as last.
No, we actually save the best for last always on this show. It is our policy and practice.
Okay, so I'm batting cleanup, basically.
Exactly. So we're hoping you're going to hit it out of the park right now. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how and why you started Mission Philadelphia?
I started Mission Philadelphia in the spring of 20 during COVID, when due to COVID and kind of business stoppage, my consulting company came to screeching halt. I was looking for something to do, and I saw a online article and a TV segment about Tom Fry, who was volunteering for St. Miriam's Parish in Flowertown, Pennsylvania, with delivering blessing bags, a gallon plastic bag with a bottle of water and a protein and some crackers and a pair of socks and so forth. And I spent a couple months, working with Tom from usually 8 at night to 1 in the morning, all throughout the city, delivering these blessing bags. And through that process, I engaged with numerous other nonprofits. And what I saw was, in general, and I say this in general, tremendous inefficiencies, tremendous lack of coordination, tremendous lack of collaboration. And I guess the point is there was a lot of effort being done, but the outcomes weren't being achieved.
Yeah.
And so I originally was going to start my own, what I call B2C or frontline organization. And then I realized that's the last thing we need is another frontline organization that's uncoordinated and that doesn't collaborate. And I figured there's an opportunity for Mission Philadelphia to try to create that coordination collaboration, which is necessary to achieve outcomes.
Yeah, so Steve is kind of like the LinkedIn of Philadelphia. Like he like connects people. That's what he does. His job is to, and we've had a chance to break bread and have dinner together. And I was impressed by the passion of your mission and the fact that you really are trying to connect people, and it's at all different levels because you and I haven't known each other that long. But during the time that we've known each other, you've been able to connect me to a number of people, both on the frontline people that are really struggling, to the organizations and the employers that are willing to want to step up and get involved. So I'm curious, like how does Mission Philadelphia work? If like somebody wanted to get involved and really wanted to kind of make change happen, how would they go about doing it?
Well, before I answer, I guess I want to touch a little bit on what Dean and Lou were talking about. I think you first have to accept the fact that food and shelter are a human right. And when I look at the credits or the screens you have during your commercial break, human rights was a key point that you had on there. The other things you had, Jeff, was breaking down barriers and the silos. And the fundamental problem in the city of Philadelphia is there's tremendous silos between the different agencies or departments that can help our neighbors in need, as well as within the not-for-profit community. And, so what we're looking for are opportunities to get organizations to work together to solve a common challenge. A great example is, I think it was probably May of 2020. I was with Tom Fry. We were in the Patco SEPTA subway station at 8th and Market, delivering blessing bags to about the 50 people that were encamped there most nights. And there were 2 tables of 3 pastors from 2 different churches delivering a home cooked meal, which was a wonderful thing. But had we gotten there an hour later, we would have fed those people a second time that night, while 50 other people in the city weren't fed at all. You go down to Kensington on a typical Saturday, and you travel 3 blocks, you'll see 4 different churches or other groups feeding people that on Sunday you'll see nobody. And, the shame of it is, or the good news, I should say, is that people do want to help, Jeff.
Yeah.
And Dean, the question is, it's too sporadic as to what's out there, and there's no focus. And my background in corporate America is market segmentation, is analytics, is looking at the challenge at hand and say, what resources do we have to solve the problem? And I think too many organizations, while they are well-meaning, at least originally, they're too myopic in terms of what they do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And I'm gonna bring Dean, and we're all gonna kind of shoot this around a little bit because I'm curious, like, we all, I think we see it in the streets. We see it in the practice as a nonprofit. I mean, Jeb's is a large nonprofit agency in Philadelphia. Same kind of thing. That coordination of services among a lot of the players in the field. And I'm curious from the HAP end, the one thing you don't see is I don't see lawyers jumping out there with lawyers at every corner as they do food giving out. And I think HAP is probably in the minority of that in that service sector, correct?
Well, yeah, I think that's part of HAP's focus is we go where our clients are. Now, what happened with COVID was that shelters and soup kitchens and day centers didn't want lots of people coming in there. Luckily, that's opening up, and so that we're back involved in those areas. But that's still a challenge for us: is how to get back into those spaces in a safe way.
Yeah, so COVID threw a loop, Steve, in all of this for all of us, I guess, but for the homeless population especially. A lot of those shelters were they were taking. I know even Sunday breakfast, they cut their beds in half because they wanted to distance everybody. And now that we're starting to come out of it a little bit, I was also I'm always amazed at Labor Day. Labor Day now has a new meaning for me. I didn't know this before I met Sunday breakfast and started understanding a little bit more about homelessness. But Labor Day is a day we all celebrate going back to school. People are at the end of the summer, and is actually one of the saddest days for men and women that are homeless because it's the first trigger that winter is coming. And that, they had to start thinking about, I can't sleep on the street or someplace outside. I got to go inside now where I have to be warm and that kind of thing. Steve, what's Philadelphia, what are you guys doing with the mission as far as trying to make those connectors stronger and to bring people like Dean back to the table so that we can kind of bring all the resources together? What's happening out there?
Well, unfortunately, what's happening out there is, you and Lou, I guess Dean to a degree, discussed some numbers. Mm-hmm. Lou mentioned the 950 homeless people unsheltered and 5,600, I believe, total. Those actually are the numbers based on the 220 point in time count, which is managed through HUD, but via Office of Homeless Services. Anyone who works in the homeless community will tell you that's total BS to say that there's 950 homeless people on the street. The realistic estimate that I see is 2,000 to 3,000, and that does not include a single of those students that you referred to at the beginning of the show. Wow. So there's a famous adage in business, and I think it applies to this also: if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And when our own OHS that is responsible for managing this process doesn't know how many homeless people are, that's a problem. I participated in the point in time count this year. I will tell you it was an unadulterated joke. Any number that you get from HUD or OHS, you have to assume is wrong. And I know that firsthand. I'm working with a couple of city council members. City council member asked, at my urging, Liz Hirsch to provide numbers. The numbers she gave, documented in email, were 25% off her own point and count numbers. So why am I mentioning this? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. If we don't agree on the size of the problem, the nature of the problem, what percent of the unsheltered homeless population is on SNAP or is on Medicaid? We don't know. What percentage is in active addiction? We don't know. Now, there's different numbers out there, but if you ask 5 people, you get 12 different numbers. And I think part of the issue is we need a mayor who is committed to solving this problem. I mean, in this city, we have 1.6 million people. No one wants homelessness. Whether you're an unsheltered homeless person, whether you're a sheltered homeless person in an OHS shelter, whether you're one of the 400,000 people in poverty, no one wants homelessness. Yet it's persisted since the 80s and when we emptied out Byberry. Yeah. And very, very little's changed.
Yeah, we're not alone. We're not alone. I think there's a lot of places. Dean, do you want to add?
No,
We're not alone. I think this is it's a national problem. But yeah, the thing that really it's that accountability factor from legislators and people that are at that position. Dean talked earlier. I think Lou might have mentioned, having somebody in a position that can make that change happen, and then just not doing anything about it. And that means getting dirty. I do believe truly that change happens from the bottom up, not from the top down, and that we have to encourage and we have to do enough to get the top to really understand the problem. And part of it, Steve is right, is getting them to understand those numbers, but not just that, to see them, to touch them, to feel them, to see the people that are on the street, the lawyers, the doctors, the people that are homeless that they would never even expect. Besides those that have behavioral health issues and coming out of the justice system.
Yeah, but Jeff, something to think about is in the city of Philadelphia right now, I believe there's roughly 4,500 inmates. The city spends $250 million for its budget. That's about $55,000 per head. If you are one of the 11,000 Afghan refugees in Fort Dix, the federal government pays for your food, your housing, your medical care. If you're one of the 4,000 to 5,000 sheltered homeless people in Philadelphia, OHS is spending $10,000 per year for 3 hots and a cot. If you're an unsheltered homeless person in this city, you're screwed. Yeah. The city spends almost nothing, literally almost nothing on food for those people. Okay? Hub for Hope. Okay? The city of Philadelphia doesn't even pay for the food. They pay to prepare it, not even for the food. So if you're an unsheltered homeless, it is the antithesis of dignity and respect. You talked about the facility in Chester where they're having that
the Scandinavian village,
progressive village, to provide people dignity because it'll make them better people when they come out. We don't give our homeless people any dignity. Yeah. And it's disgusting.
Yeah.
You're so true, Dinka.
No, I was just on to go back on what Steve said. I was looking at a program that Temple and RHD just put together, and working on giving support to people who come to the hospital over and over. And so RHD and Temple, $27,000 a year is the cost for an individual to provide not only housing support but wraparound services. We're paying $40,000, $50,000 a year to house inmates.
Right.
For 27, we're giving people not only housing, but we're helping them get the mental health treatment and the services they need to get out of homelessness.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So the numbers are not, the cost is not that great if we really wanted to do it.
Yeah, Jeff, I agree with you when you made the comment a moment ago that real change happens from the bottom, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. But on the flip side, to what Dean just commented on, if we're willing to spend $55,000 to incarcerate someone with lousy outcomes relative to what happens there, yet for for half the money, we could give someone housing, food, wraparound services, but there's no money for that. There's money for tanks, there's money for airplanes, but there's no money. There's money to incarcerate people, but there's no money to help people, as Dean was suggesting, with Temple and RHD.
Totally get it. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. If people want more information, you can go to www.missionphiladelphia.org is their website. And you can reach Steve at steve@missionphiladelphia.org and get more information on the work that he's doing in the city. And again, trying to do what he can to chip away at our hunger and homelessness in Philadelphia. Steve, thanks so much for being on. Dean, if you wanted to get hold of HAP, how would we go about doing that?
So our website is haplegal.org, and my email address is dbeer, first initial, last name, at haplegal.org. Email me directly, and that's probably the two easiest ways to get a hold of us.
There you go. So thank you both for joining us. I totally appreciate both of you and all the hard work you're doing in this space. We definitely got to put this on more radar screens and start really chipping away at the problem. And a lot of it is going to take, pulling our sleeves up and getting dirty. So thank you for that. I do want to, before we close, I just want to mention there's a block party celebrating Reentry Month on June 4th from noon to 4 o'clock. We're going to be celebrating in North Philadelphia. I hope you'll come out. It's 8th and Diamond Street from 12 to 4. And on June 2nd is reentry. Is a celebration for reentry month. So looking forward. Again, thank you to all of our guests. And we're going to see you soon. This is the Looking Forward Show. And I'm Jeff Abram.